Okay, cool. It looks like we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah. I'm a senior at the college, and I will be moderating today. So first off, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm just going to ask everyone real quick to make sure you're muted if you're not one of our panelists or two panelists tonight, just so we don't have any crosstalk. So thank you, and a warm welcome to our two guests, Chasten Buttigieg and Dr. Eric Cervini. Dr. Cervini is an award-winning scholar of LGBTQ+ history and a recent author of The Deviance War, which I happen to have right here, which is a New York Times best-selling history of the fight for gay rights in America before Stonewall, which I didn't even know was a thing, but is so cool. So plus he's also a former member of the IOP, which we are not in, but wishing we were in. So Chasten Buttigieg is a fellow at the IOP this semester. He is also an author of this book, a memoir, which is also a New York Times bestseller and is very good. He is a LGBTQ+ advocate, and before coming, quote unquote, to the IOP, he worked as a busboy, a dog walker, a nursing assistant, a waiter, a cashier, a bartender, and most recently, a middle school drama and humanities teacher. So those are our two lovely guests, and a big welcome to them. And so second, after introducing them, I have to say to everyone, happy LGBTQ+ History Month. So I didn't know this, but this is the 27th LGBTQ+ History Month. It came about in 1994 when a St. Louis high school teacher suggested that LGBTQ+ history needed a whole month devoted to its study. So conveniently, October was free of conflicts. No other major history month was taking place then. And Coming Out Day, National Coming Out Day, is on October 11th. So it seemed like the perfect choice. So with that introduction, a little bit of context, we're going to dive right into a discussion about LGBTQ history, politics, and culture with our two amazing guests. So we're going to start off with a few questions from me and then try to move quickly into audience questions so we can get as many people's voices heard as possible. So I'm going to start off with something hopefully cheerful for both of you. How did you come to understand yourselves as a member of the LGBTQ+ community? And what has that community meant to you now that you're part of it?
I'm going to punt that to you, Chasten, first.
Well, first, Hannah, thank you so much. Eric, it's really nice to see you. I have your book, but the kitchen's a little dark behind me.
So is my bookcase. It's in there somewhere.
I'm so glad that we can make space for a conversation like this, especially during October. And I think, you know, it's so important that we continue having these conversations. And I'm glad that Eric and I get the chance to have it tonight. So I guess, you know, what coming into my own identity and figuring out like, oh, I might be gay is it happened at a fairly young age. The problem was everything that I was learning about being gay was that it was bad. So I did not know that there was a queer community. I did not know that there were like other people like me around me. And it wasn't really until I came out at 18 that I truly understood that there were other people in Traverse City, Michigan who also identified as queer. That would affirm my identity and my existence just for simply being myself. I thought it was something that I needed to like apologize for and atone for. Everything I had learned from my government or my church or my social groups told me that that was wrong. But growing up in high school, I guess it was always just like, you know, I liked seeing boys in the hallway instead of girls, you know, but that was the really scary part. Was the only thing I knew about that was that that was inappropriate, right? Or that was sinful. So it was a longer journey for me, but I also have to check myself because I realized like I still got the privilege to come out at 17, 18 years old. So. Eric, when did you choose to be gay?
Very early. In the womb. Well, first of all, Hannah and Chasten, thank you so much for having me, and Christian and Mark and Amy, who I believe is listening also. It is so great to be back, even if virtually. at the IOP. I have so many incredible memories. And from my first internship to my first like meeting a politician was at the IOP. So it is such an honor to be back. And it's also very cool to talk to a whole bunch of Harvard kids because it's been a while. I was class of 2014. And so that means I entered Harvard in August or early September of 2010. I came out and said the words, "I'm gay," for the first time exactly 2 weeks before my FOP trip. I had never said it out loud to anyone before. I said it to my closest female friend who happened to also be the last girl I ever asked out. So I was 18, had never uttered it to myself or to anyone else before, never kissed a boy, nothing like that. And realized that, you know, this was a logical time to make that decision. Of course, I had been grappling with some of those feelings, Chasten, that you mentioned, and trying to figure out, you know, what do I do with these urges that are definitely wrong for a kid growing up in Central Texas. And it wasn't until I started visiting schools, and I have a feeling that admissions officers paired me when I was visiting different schools, they paired me with openly gay students, even though I had never said that I was LGBT, that I was, you know, but I think they kind of gathered just from my interests and like some of my writing, and started to realize, oh my gosh, there exists the possibility to be openly gay and to be happy. And so I made the choice to come out 2 weeks before college and went from 0 to 100. Everyone knew I was openly gay, and tried to be very open about it. So it was very abrupt, but ultimately I'm so glad I did it in Harvard, despite some of its complications, ended up being, you know, an incredibly important part of my identity formation, I think.
Okay, I'm going to switch around the order that I planned to ask my questions because I think you've just mentioned, I'm actually really curious. What was it like? I know it was only 6 years ago, but what was it like being gay at Harvard in 2014? And how do you think it's changed since then? And was there a moment in that sort of time span you said, okay, I really need to focus on LGBTQ history? Like, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, so I fell into it. I was out and very comfortable, but at like varying stages. Like my mom was the last person I told. So I was out to like the class of 2014 before I was out to my family. And I think that shows, you know, it was a very open place. I think there were times where it was difficult. And I think, Chasten, something that you talk about so movingly in your book is the internalized homophobia, right? Like that is, at the end of the day, the hardest part to overcome. Is not even like, I knew deep down that my mother, who raised me, would be fine with my sexual identity, but I still put off telling her. And I think something you write, if you guys haven't read his book, I think one of the most incredible parts about the human psyche that you see in the book, and something that Frank Kameny, whom I write about as well, recognized, it's that internalized fear of your own self that is the most important thing to overcome, and not just at the individual level, but also at the societal level, to get that social change. And so I don't know, y'all have to tell me how things are different, but like, I don't know, I had my first kiss, I think it was at the First Chance Dance. I won't give any more details, but it was right as like Tinder and all those apps were coming along. So I'm sure things are probably there are more options for how to meet people now. But I don't know, I'll have to turn the tables on y'all at some point if we have time.
Cool. Okay, so leading off of that, I guess a little bit, I'm curious. So one thing that I know has been talked about a lot recently is that we really don't study LGBTQ plus history in schools, and we really don't think about it. So a lot of us have our first interaction with it in college. Like I know I certainly did. So I'm curious, like, what do you think, both of you, what do both of you think should be done to push that forward to make sure that like everyone, my generation and younger, knows about our history? And yeah.
Justin, what do you think? Because you're the teacher, and like I think that's
I
what needs to be.
now. You know, I felt such an obligation as a teacher to include LGBTQ inclusive history, or, you know, little nuggets of knowledge or experience along the way, making sure that students were being mindful, you know, from everything from whatever the curriculum in the classroom was to just the way that we speak with one another in the classroom. You know, we even took on a lot of homophobia just in students' language in a lot of the schools that I've worked in. Right. So when someone says something like, that's so gay, you know, to have a teacher like me, I'm going to stop everything and we're going to have a conversation about that. Not every teacher does that. Right. I certainly never had a teacher who did that. I did not know that like queer people existed growing up. I never heard the word Stonewall. I did not know that there was a community. The things that I had sort of heard, like my first experiences were like Matthew Shepard, learning about the AIDS epidemic. Again, everything is like victim and tragedy and darkness and sin, right? So as a teacher, obviously one who's like quite comfortable in my identity, I always tried to find ways to include it in my curriculum, or at least just talking about my husband or normalizing that type of language, right? Not every teacher also feels comfortable doing that, you know, coming out in school. I found out after I graduated high school that I had multiple teachers who were gay, who never felt comfortable enough to even talk about their personal life at school because they feared that they would lose their job. I remember the first time I really thought about like queer theory was in college when we were reading Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in one of my drama classes. And I was talking about it with my advisor, who I write about in the book, who was like the first person who made space for me to feel comfortable talking about my identity. And she was like, Brick's totally gay, you know that, right? And I was like, what? No, like I didn't even have the ability to see beyond the text or the dialogue or the conflict in the play to recognize that this character is gay. And like, that's the drama in the show, right? And that was the first time I ever had a teacher talk to me about the idea that, you know, there's this big, wide queer world out there. And I had no idea that there were like gay authors and poets and musicians, and, you know, that there were books in the library. I didn't even know that there was a center on campus. I mean, it truly was like, you can take the boy out of the country and the country is still in the boy. Like I had no idea that this world existed. So I think it's really important as we move on. Like when I've gone back to my college campus, I went there on the campaign trail. There's a giant rainbow flag on campus. And there's like all these student organizations now. And you know, I think that emboldens teachers to talk about things. You know, it creates a culture on the campus where students are more aware, you know, that, I mean, I went to school in northern Wisconsin, so it's a little different than Harvard, I think. You know, that like you also walk and learn amongst people who identify differently than you.
Yeah, man, I wish I had a teacher like you. I mean, yeah, growing up in Central Texas, we didn't have that, and very similarly, I think one of the biggest issues was not having that template. Even though I had a very progressive family, I actually went to a very progressive church. I first learned about pronouns by using a gender inclusive Bible in my church, and like everyone's minds in like New York and LA are blown when I tell them that like, we said kingdom, we didn't say kingdom, right? Like there are ways of like of getting some of the basic concepts of like queer theory and basic, you know, being progressive without, you know, while also not being able to embrace your own identity. So it's like this weird compartmentalization of my identity versus like what is right that was happening on my end. And, you know, I think, Hannah, you asked about, you know, what made me start studying queer history, and it wasn't a class. Like, you tell me, there wasn't when I was there, but is there like a queer history 101 class at Harvard right now? Do y'all know?
I think it's 101, but there's definitely classes that relate to it.
Okay, well that's good, because when I was there certainly was not. And like, I don't know if it is now, but like WGS wasn't a department. It was like, it was under, you know, the auspices of something else. And, you know, I found out. What's that? Oh. No, I found out that I was, you know, interested in studying queer history because I happened to watch the film Milk. If you haven't seen it, it's incredible. It's about Harvey Milk. And when you watch it and you realize how dramatic it is and how important it is, and you realize, okay, first of all, how was I not taught this, right? Like that was the first thing that came through my mind. I was like, this is, like Senator Feinstein found Harvey Milk's body right after he was murdered, and like they don't teach this in high school, and they should. But then the second thing that goes through your mind is, why don't I, if I don't know this story, what other stories are out there from history that haven't been taught to me? And so I thought I was going to be a gov major. I thought I was going to go to law school, but happened to be taking some really incredible history classes, including an urban history seminar, and needed to pick a topic for my junior history research paper. Happened to watch Milk, and was like, oh, this could be interesting. Maybe I could talk about like the use of public space in San Francisco in Harvey Milk. But of course, all the primary sources are in San Francisco. And I was like a financial aid student who couldn't make it over there. I hadn't gotten my IOP grant yet. That was for my senior thesis. And so I bussed down to Washington, D.C. because I saw another name that popped up in, I think, the Hollis website, the Harvard Library database that popped up was Frank Kameny. And other historians had long regarded him as the grandfather, or one of the grandfathers of the gay rights movement. But there hadn't been a full book-length study of his activism. And so I bussed down and went. It was my first ever archive that I entered, and that was like 8 years ago, and I just now climbed out of that hole, just finished. So I like to tell, I think in my 5-year reunion report, I said that after 5 years after graduating from Harvard, I finally finished my senior thesis, and now it's you can go get it at Barnes & Noble.
That is incredible. I hope mine doesn't take that long.
Yes.
There is also, I just wanted to add, there's a happy ending to Chasten's story about many of his teachers not being out at school. We happen to have gone to the same high school, and some of those teachers still are there and are now out at school. And it was really nice for me to, know that they were there. So, okay, cool. So it looks like we're at about 7:22, and I'm just going to move us right into audience questions. So the first 3 or so questions should be from Harvard undergrads. And for this portion, if you have a question, just raise your hand via the raise your hand feature. I will call your name and try very, very hard to get it right. And when I call you on you, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Cool. So if anyone has any questions, raise your hand. Kaya?
Hi. So I'm also from Traverse City. I'm a freshman. And so I was wondering like what you guys thought about how it's changed over the years, like in like the queer community. And then also just like, I guess expanding that to like in general, like what are some like concrete things that you think could be done to, I guess, take some of those smaller steps?
Yeah, Traverse City is in the Zoom tonight. So I remember being a young kid, and I wrote about this in the book. There was this We Are Traverse City movement. So they had this rainbow bumper sticker, and it was not for LGBTQ pride. It was a rainbow sticker that said, "We are Traverse City." And it's supposed to be about building community, that we all belong. And that's where I question, like, was not one gay person in the room when they drew that up. But they started putting these stickers on city vehicles like cop cars and the city buses. And there was such a backlash to it, anti-gay backlash to these rainbow stickers being on buses and police cars, that the city removed the stickers. That's how homophobic it was here. And when people were like, oh no, it's not a gay thing, it's an everyone thing, people still like demanded those stickers be removed from city vehicles. This past year, I came home for Pride. This summer, Front Street, the busiest street in downtown, right? It was painted rainbow. You know, Black Lives Matter is up on the marquee at the theater downtown. Stores have rainbow flags flying in the front of the stores. That would never have happened when I was a kid here. When I went to the gay bar here after I came out, it was like an 18 and up gay bar. It was like the only safe space to go, right? I remember people used to like drive their pickup trucks through the parking lot where there's a lot of gravel there and spin their tires really fast so the gravel would like fly up at people like standing outside smoking a cigarette or just, you know, hanging out outside. And then I come home for Pride and we're like marching down Front Street with drag queens and like thousands of people, and there's like a speech at F&M Park. You know, I got to speak in front of thousands of people here. Our mayor is openly gay in Traverse City. I mean, it has progressed a lot, but that's because people didn't give up on it. That's because people stuck around. Some of the people who are here in Traverse City didn't give up on Traverse City. And I've been surprised as I'm in DC right now, and I will meet people at the grocery store who recognize me and they'll say like, I can't believe you came back. And the thing is, you just don't give up on places and people that you love. And the way we make other cities like Traverse City progress is not giving up on them. Like we pretend that the presidency is the only office that matters. It's like the biggest show on television. But when I was a kid going to school here, I needed a president who affirmed my identity, but I also needed a school board that understood how important it was to teach queer history, to let teachers know that they wouldn't lose their jobs if they came out, how important it was to make safe spaces for LGBTQ kids, because they knew we existed. They knew we were there. I went to a high school of 5,000 kids, and they just pretended like we didn't exist. So there's a lot there. I know there's a lot to unpack there, but it's not just about the show in Washington. It's not just about, you know, these things that are far away. It's what's happening in our own backyard. The people here who never gave up on it, who show up and demand that our city council make this the most progressive city that it can be and the best version of itself that it can be. School board members who affirm the identity of queer teachers and students. I think Traverse City has come a long way. It is a really weird place. I like to say it's like the blueberry and the raspberry jello, you know, but that blueberry is very small. My street here is like Biden, Trump, Biden, Trump, Biden, Trump. It's like the fantasy of every like CNN embed's dream to like come, you know, like what is this magical place where people are so, you know, split politically. But it's progressing and it's changing because people are committed to making sure that it changes. That's not to erase everything that still needs to be done here, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Traverse City is very much that blueberry. Okay, so next up, Dominic.
Hi, I'm Dominic. I'm a sophomore at the college, and I'm not from Traverse City, I'm afraid. But my question for Eric is, I think a common criticism at Harvard is when we're like thinking critically, we're like, oh, all these people who wrote textbooks made all these mistakes and had these biases. And now you kind of get to be on the other end and you're the person writing history. How does that feel? What did you learn through that process?
Oof. I feel a lot more sympathy for people who write any sort of book, especially nonfiction, especially, you know, when you're becoming an expert in a field, you have to read all the other books that are on a certain topic. And once you have, you know, real expertise on an issue, then you start to notice all the errors in other books and other like published works that are like authoritative and otherwise, you know, are the go-to. And I think in a way it's almost reassuring because it tells you that like, and I think one of the issues, and I think this is good advice for anyone working on a written project, or really any project, whether it's your thesis or some sort of creative project, is, you know, you're never going to reach the maximum of knowledge, right? You're never going to be able to fit all of the knowledge into your thesis or into your book or into that essay. It's just about finding, you know, a hole in what has already been written, and figuring out, okay, what did they miss? And on top of that, something that was even more important for me, because I think that's more of an academic focus, is taking, you know, whether it's the archive or secondary sources and making it accessible, because there really hadn't been, you know, a comprehensive book about American queer history, at least modern queer history, that was written in a truly enjoyable narrative form. So I was like, everyone should know about, you know, this 1,000-page FBI file, but I'm going to distill it to make it actually enjoyable. And I think that's a lot more important than, you know, making sure that like it's super duper comprehensive and 1,000 pages long. And that actually makes it the hardest thing. But that said, you know, because we're always finding new pieces of information about the past, or even, you know, if you're in the sciences, about science, you know, we have to cut the people who did enter the arena, as Brene Brown puts it. Anyone, Brene Brown fans, you know, you have to cut them some slack and say, you know, they put themselves out there and they said, hey, this is what I found. You just gotta own it.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Miguel.
Hi. So I'm not at Harvard anymore, but I went to the Kennedy School and I read Eric's book, and I found it fascinating to uncover that story. And I'm originally from Mexico, and I kept wondering how many of these stories exist around the world. So my question to you is whether you have any plans to pursue a similar effort to uncover all of these LGBTQ history around the world.
Thank you so much, first of all, for reading it. And like, I definitely hope to do that. I'm actually currently in Los Angeles, and you know, it's something I'm also happy to talk to people about, kind of moving from academia or even from Harvard into more the entertainment industry, because I think that's honestly where we need the most help. I think there are some incredible historians out there doing great queer history, but I think we need to now make even more of it accessible and entertaining. Because like I said, it wasn't a class at Harvard or high school that got me interested in queer history. It was a film. And I want to kind of replicate that process and get as many people as possible, people like you in their own home countries or their own cultures, to say, hey, you know, what have I not been taught about my past and my identity? And for people in their own countries, in their own contexts, to be starting their own research. But that said, definitely keep an eye out. There are going to be some fun projects coming along having to do with more international history, hopefully soon.
That's so exciting. I will also be keeping an eye out for those. Okay, cool. Next up, we have Michael.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Michael. I am a junior at the college, and I have a question that's sort of half Chasten, half Eric. I'm not sure exactly how it'll get answered. But I'm wondering about sort of, especially, you know, as you say, you know, you picked up your interest in queer history from film. That, you know, the monographs, like the next step of the monograph is to make its way beyond itself. And I think beyond films, you know, elementary and secondary curricula are really important. Where you know, Chasten's talked about trying to, you know, bring that sort of history, at least partially, into his work. I imagine that queer history, I'm by no means, and I've never studied it formally, reckons with a lot of the same sort of archival absences as the study of women, or especially the study of enslaved people or Native Americans in the United States. How do we reckon with those absences and try to make queer history, you know, like African American history, like women's history, expand beyond that month, expand beyond into the core of our curricula? And I guess specifically one thing that I wonder about is sort of the sort of the tortured dance around historical figures, Alexander Hamilton, Langston Hughes, wondering, what is there a better way? I mean, executing it in the middle school, or you know, doing the research in the archive. How can we go about that work?
Chasten, as the middle school teacher,
No,
how do we do it?
I'll let Eric talk about history. You know, something that I've been really struggling with is I'm trying to put it into words, and I've just been thinking about this a lot, actually, in the last, what, 10 months? No, 7 months since the campaign ended. I've been digesting a lot of what happened on the campaign. And to be honest, like, some of that trauma and some of those reflections made it into the third section of my book, but I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time to meet my deadline to process everything that I wanted to say. And I've been thinking a lot about homophobia and how it just permeates in every bubble in American society, and how it often goes unchecked. Like, I think it's because, and Eric, I don't know, this is like the first time I've talked about it out loud, actually. Maybe I shouldn't do that on a Zoom at Harvard.
Safe space.
I think the reason we struggle with homophobia as a country, with recognizing the importance of pride, recognize the importance of a history month, recognizing the importance of empowering teachers and students, making it, you know, a bigger issue and an important issue beyond like one parade a year, is because for many people in this country, our rights and our humanity and our dignity are still up for debate. I think we still maybe live in a country where we are reckoning with that perhaps those issues aren't always taken as seriously because some people, many in positions of power, don't see us as equal human beings and don't see our community as worthy of, you know, gross examination and celebration. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just something I've been, you know, noodling on. I thought I saw a lot of it in the campaign, and, you know, as a political spouse, you're not allowed to call that shit out. And that was the hard part, is watching how America responded to that race, and especially some people in the media or in positions of power. And I wonder, like, is that because we're still having this conversation maybe internally, quietly, behind the scenes? Like, do queer people, especially queer people of color, especially trans people, truly matter, and are they truly deserving of equal space and representation and rights and history and curriculum? You know, and I think for some people the answer is no in this country. Eric, what do you think about that?
I completely agree, and I think, you know, of course, we're 1 week out, and I think finding common ground is going to be something that we're going to need a lot more of as we heal as a country. And I think that's something that I'm really excited. I think the country is going to be looking at you and Pete to give us that, because I think you already showed us what that kind of basic decency looks like. And when it comes to education and how do we get there as like a country, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, it was National Coming Out Day, and I was in another panel for Harvard Alumni Association about the meaning of coming out. And one thing that we all agreed on this panel, which was a really diverse intersectional group, was that we were all a bit conflicted about the importance of coming out day, because one of the problems with it is it puts the burden on us, right, to be coming out and to be forcing that change, which of course is important, in a big part of how social change is done. But when it comes to education, I think in addition to changing, you know, curricula, and in addition to educating children, you know, we need to be fighting for a world in which coming out is not necessary, where, you know, parents are no longer giving gender reveal parties for their unborn children and causing, you know, horrible forest fires in California, right? Like, we need to be like trying to educate them as well, to make it so that kids don't have to come out. And that's when we'll finally be there. And so I think it's got to be a multi-pronged approach. And you know, I think we'll see, but when it comes to changing hearts and minds, especially adults, you know, like, I was texting my aunt last night, who is a rabid Trump supporter in South Carolina, trying to convince her that voting for Lindsey Graham could potentially mean that I won't have a wedding, right? That, like, if I wanted to have a wedding in Texas or South Carolina or something, that, like, if you look at the GOP platform, you know, it just would break my heart if she supported that, and the receipts are right there. So I think finding that common ground and making it in terms of emotion and connection is what we got to fight for. But remember that we can't always put the burden on those who have so much to lose.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I apologize, Aria?
Hi, yeah, it is Aria, actually.
Hi, Chasten and Eric. I'm a freshman at the college right now, and my question, I guess, is sort of for both of you, or either of you, or whoever wants to talk. But it's just about allyship and sort of what is the most effective and most kind way to be an ally, and especially in the political climate right now, because, I feel like there's a struggle, of course, between not trying to take a struggle that's not yours, not trying to say that that's your own, right? Taking up space that's not meant to be taken up by your voice, but also speaking up and out on behalf of people in the queer community. And so I guess, yeah, I would just ask for what you think is the most effective way to build allyship and to see allyship in the world.
I think a good indicator for anyone who thinks of themselves as an ally would be to ask yourself, do the people who I am seeking to be an ally for know that I am an ally? I think a lot of allyship is silent. That people just are well assuming, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm cool with the LGBTQ community. How are you showing that? So if you're a teacher, are you making sure that your students know that that is a safe space? If you're a place of business, are you making sure that people understand that that is a safe space? Are you putting your money where your mouth is and donating to organizations that seek to help people not only in your community, but maybe nationally or globally? You have, allyship cannot just be silent. And Twittervism, Twitter activism, is a very small sliver of activism. Like if you post the thing on Instagram, that's great. And whoever's following you can see like, okay, she's cool, she's on my team. But if I think a majority of people go through life thinking like, I'm chill, I'm cool with everyone, how are you making sure that people in your community know that? Are you voting for candidates that will support those people and not hurt them? Like Eric reaching out and talking to his aunt. Because if you say you love someone and you vote for someone who's gonna actively hurt them, we're gonna have to reassess the definition of love. There are people who are hurting in this country who are made whole or who are supported by organizations that are hanging on by a thread. And so that's why I always tell people, tweeting is great, please put your money where your mouth is. People who are housing and feeding and supporting and employing other people. That to me is allyship. I gotta say, when I came out, what gave me the strength to came out, or what gave me the strength to come out, was straight people that I love, my friends, my family, saying, I will fight for you, I'll fight like hell for you. I have no idea what it means to be gay. I'm very scared for you, but I'm here for you and I love you. And those words of affirmation saved my life. They truly saved my life because I was ready to end it all. I was convinced that I would be such a burden, a disappointment, and an embarrassment to these people that I thought that I needed to disappear. But then those same people affirmed my existence. And that's why as teachers, as friends, as parents, it's so important that we turn to the people that we love and say, I support you. If you ever want to talk about anything, I am here for you. And I think that's kind of awkward. I don't know, maybe it's a Midwestern thing, or maybe we just all don't talk about like religion, politics, and feelings. We certainly didn't talk about any of those things in my house. But, you know, to take that break, to take that pause and say, look, by the way, I really love you. And I will do whatever it takes to support you and make space for you and listen to you. And all of those things are allyship. So it can't just be a tweet and it can't just be in your head. You really have to do the work. And doing the work is beyond reading books and tweeting nice things.
I think that's completely right. And I think if there's anything I've learned from studying queer history in America, and especially writing a biography of a cis gay white man, what you realize is, you know, even though we are persecuted, does not mean we are immune from persecuting others. So that means because we're, you know, granted or arrive into this world with a certain amount of privilege, even though we fall within the umbrella of LGBTQ+, historically, time and time again, we have left people behind. And I think recognizing that, yes, I need allies around me of people who are straight, but also I need to be an ally to those within my own community who historically my ancestors have sacrificed to the name of respectability, and at the end of the day, hurting our entire movement. You know, it's been a learning experience, and I think it's been a learning experience for everyone this year in particular, especially if you're cis and white and a man. Then you have to say, all right, I can get married, I can maybe pass as straight, I am now in a position of privilege. So how can I use that privilege to now amplify the voices of those who were the first to fight for us at Stonewall, right? It wasn't the guys who looked like me, it was the people who were gender nonconforming who were the ones to fight at Stonewall. And yet they're the first to be excluded within our movement. So now we have to say, all right, I have this moral obligation to pay back essentially a debt and right a wrong that has been perpetuated over and over and over and over again in history, all the way through the 2000s, all the way up until now. And remembering the other thing is, as Harvard students, right, or any college student in America is taught, like, you have to start something, right? You have to write the op-ed, you have to create this organization in order to like make it and to prove that you actually care about an issue. When in reality, there have been people and organizations that have been fighting the good fight for racial equality, for Black trans women forever, right? And remembering, like, we don't need to be the ones to like be, you know, leading the charge on Twitter or elsewhere. And like Chasten said, to be amplifying, not just retweeting, but setting up that recurring donation. And that's allyship. It's not like taking up someone's space, as you put it so well.
I'll chime in with what, just pointing everyone to the comment section of what Michael said. It's really true, Michael. If it doesn't cost something, you know, money, time, social capital, emotional labor, can you call it a contribution? And it's a really important question to ask yourself. What does this cost me? And how am I contributing just beyond kind words and intentions? And Eric, I'm so glad, snaps to you for bringing, like, we have to show for people in our own community too. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm sure like people on this call and you yourself like have met queer people who have no idea who Marsha P. Johnson is, or Sylvia Rivera, or what Stonewall was, and who just have like hot opinions about like what gay should look like and sound like and be, without any idea of the people, you know, that fought for them, or how we even came to enjoy these rights and privileges that we have today. So we've got to do the work too.
We are over time, but we have one more question. So if you guys are willing. Okay. So Raleigh?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask a quick question about sort of activism and engagement on LGBTQ questions among younger generations, especially people who have been born and will be born sort of since 2000 or mid-2000s, and how to ensure that there isn't sort of a general perception that the gay question has been settled at the political level, how to make sure that activism and engagement continues both here at home and with an eye towards work to be done abroad. So, yeah.
Eric, I'll let you go first.
Ooh, I mean, start reading, right? Like, not just history books, but also like reading the news, right? Like, if you make sure, I think what everyone should do, and hopefully everyone did it, like go and follow these organizations that I mentioned that are doing the hard work, like the Anti-Violence Project in New York, which tracks and writes essentially, an obituary anytime a Black trans woman is murdered, which is happening at the rate of 1 a week. Now that's twice the rate of last year, right? So it's not just like learning the history, but staying in tune with current events and seeing, you know, not just like how scary it is that we're about to have gay marriage potentially taken away from us, right? But like, who is dying out there, every single week, and who aren't being talked about as a result of, this Supreme Court nomination? You know, who are the people that are being forgotten? And I think that's probably the thing I'd leave with you with is, anything I've learned from history is that as we're in the middle of a social movement, I really think this year, 2020, is probably the most profound social and political revolution since Stonewall in 1969. there are always going to be people forgotten, especially once we've won, right? So I think being vigilant about that and making sure that we're doing the work to stay informed, not just among our own community, but those, who have historically been marginalized. That's the first step.
Yeah, that's great, Eric. I was so surprised on the campaign trail how many I met with young people every day, a lot of LGBTQ centers, kids who are in the foster care system, I mean, queer people from coast to coast. And sometimes I felt like an imposter in that room because I also didn't have all of the answers about our community, right? Because I also was not taught about our own community. And I'm worried what that means for people who come of age in a country where they literally, maybe just like me, like they grow up and then they turn 18 and they run away and they have no idea where they come from, what it means to belong in a community. And so I'm glad that there are people like Eric who are writing, books about our history, who are devoted to media projects, who help, especially younger generation, learn about where we've come from and where we're going. And I think there's a lot to be done in the education system, not to take us back to the previous comment, but we have to make it acceptable in this country to say the word gay and queer and trans and lesbian. And there are places in this country where you can't say those things at work. You will get fired. You will lose your job. You will no longer be allowed to teach if you say those words. So how can we expect kids to grow up in a country where they, feel empowered to be themselves if they never even hear the word that they think is floating around up there as the one that associates with their identity? And I gotta say, I had office hours this week, and someone came to office hours and had never heard of Will and Grace. Let's all take a moment to talk about that. I'm just kidding. Eric, that's why you have to
watch it. It's so good. If y'all haven't watched it, I know it's like, when did it come? 20 years ago, Chasten? Like
93, 94. Yeah, that's funny, right? That was like the first thing I wrote about in the book, where I was like, Will and Grace. It was like taboo to like watch gay people on TV, and they're like, I've never heard of it. Like, oh shit, I'm old. But that's like the thing about that is there should be 100 Will and Graces. There should be hundreds of books like Eric's. I'm so privileged to be able to have, the opportunity to have written a memoir. I want to read thousands of more stories of queer people around this country. And like Eric said, we just have to keep elevating the dialogue in people's stories and the reality of queer people in this country. Because unfortunately, many folks who control those spaces aren't. Like last night after the whole Supreme Court thing, I was flipping the channels like, where are the queer people? Like, why aren't we talking about this, But I know we're running out of time, so I will just shut up.
Queer as Folk is also another classic that everyone needs to watch.
Gasp.
So good. Christian.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation and a total treat to moderate, so thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope y'all have a great night. Keep up the good fight, and yeah.
Buy Eric's book.
Oh, yes.
And Chasten's. Wait, I gotta take a screenshot. It's so cute. Thanks, everyone. Such an honor and so good to be back. And feel free to email me if you have any questions about turning your thesis into a movie or something.
Thanks, Eric. It was so great to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Christian. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good job, Hannah.
Thanks, Chasten. Thanks, Eric.
Bye, y'all. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you so much.